Lab did one.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, April 13th. The time is 3:02 p.m. and I will do a roll call. Councilmember Lip. Here. Councilmember Storsett is excused. Councilmember Rodenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Likens. Here. Councilmember Henderson.
Oh, here, sorry, we're standing.
No worries. Councilmember Martin.
Here.
And Councilmember Barber. Here. It's gonna be a fun meeting, I can tell already. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to city staff joining us. Our city attorney Daniel Kenny is online with us. Thank you, Daniel. Welcome. Our chief of police Kelly Busey is here. Our public works director Jeff Langhelm, wastewater superintendent Chuck Roy. Oh, we blinked on your name. City administrator Knudsen. Thank you all for being here. We'll go right.
City clerk.
And assistant. See, I told you. This is a good meeting. Tiffany Allen. Thank you, Tiffany, for being here and running everything. Really appreciate you doing that. Our first discussion item is the wastewater comprehensive plan amendment for Rosedale preliminary plat. And this report will come to us from our public works director, Jeff Langholm.
Okay, thank you. Would you mind promoting stepping into?
Jeff.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, council. Hopefully you got a chance to look at the cover memo and the tech memo that was provided to you for this presentation. Just a quick overview. The reason for this presentation today, well, of course, we're not looking for council to make any decision here today. We are just wanting to present options for this Rosedale preliminary plat for them to be able to get connecting their proposed plat to the city's sewer system. I can share with you real quick on the screen, so I'm sure most of you know what we are. I'm just going to orient you to where we're talking about. I know this is zoomed way out. I'll zoom in just a second, but of course, here's the city. I am going to zoom into. Of course, my screen is covering. I'm going to zoom into the area. We're talking about Basin 18 on the very east side of Rosedale Street. All of our basins are numbered from 1 to essentially 21 or so. And the lift station number is associated with the basin number. So if you hear me talk about lift station 18, then basin 18. Anyway, lift station 18, basin 18 is undeveloped. There is no lift station in that basin today. The wastewater comprehensive plan amendment or wastewater comprehensive plan was created. They used, I don't know if it's 2 foot, 6 foot LiDAR data, LiDAR contours, rough contours. When you do surveying and when you do sewer design, actually you use, data for topography that's down to the 1/10 of an inch or less. So when putting together the wastewater comprehensive plan, the data that was used for survey was very rough. There were quite a few assumptions that were made. Essentially, and I'll just basin 18 here a little bit. Here's my pen in the chair. There it is. Yeah. So basin 18, as you can see, is right at the very west end of Rosedale Street. It straddles Rosedale Street. The yellow is properties that are in the city limits. The angled hatch pattern is the properties that are in the urban growth area, but not yet in the city limits. So we have identified the total basin, even that base section of the basin that's in the urban growth area. The anticipated pump station for this lift station is located here at the very bottom of the basin, not just south, and that just has to be coincidence with the lowest point in the basin. So this dotted line you see is the force main that comes out of that lift station, pump station, and connects here on Schoolhouse Road. There's an existing sewer manhole there that we're discharging to. So the idea is that this, when you look at contours, The highest elevations are here at the north end, the lowest elevations are at the south end. So the idea is that gravity sewer will be installed and convey down to this lift station and pump back up. We try and only have, we try and create as many or as few lift stations as possible. Of course, we have the lowest operating expenses to having multiple lift stations everywhere. So, but because of the fact that we're using rough contour information, we anticipate when developers come in, they're going to have precise contour information, and we understand there's going to be minor tweaks, adjustments to some of these maps when they come in, because maybe our information wasn't so good at the 30,000 foot level of the complex. And that's what happened in this case. The long and short is that Contour Engineering is representing the property owner. And they did some quick calculations, and they said, wow, you're gonna really have a deep sewer to get gravity sewer all the way through their plat, which this property here and this property here are the two parcels that represent the Rosedale plat. And I'll bring up an image of that in just a second. But in order to get sewer from this end, you can gravity it down all on 56 to this lift station. There were some areas, and it was kind of reflected in the technical memo from HCM. Yeah, almost 40-foot deep pipes. That's not acceptable. I mean, it's dangerous to build. We'll just start there. It's also, to have a manhole that has an invert of more than 35 feet, you cannot, by physics, have a vector that will create enough suction to get down to the bottom of that manhole, go all the way up the snout and back into the tank. So, since it's almost impossible to build something like that, we just say there's a limit. And we believe that we're right at or beyond this limit to do what is called out in the city's own wastewater comprehensive plan. So we acknowledge that when we heard that from Contour, and we said, okay, well, let's look at what other options are available. So we've had some discussions. This has been going on for a while. You guys are smiling back there. It's been going on for a while. That's the applicant, engineer back there. And so what we've done is we've said, okay, let's talk about options. But the initial option was proposed by, and I'm going to review the options here in just a second. The initial option that was proposed by the applicant was to do grinder pumps at each of the 31 lots. So I'm going to switch here and show what the plat looks like quickly. Stephanie, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in if I'm saying something that's not quite right.
All right, well, so far you're doing good.
You get a pass.
I get passing grade.
Yeah.
It's early stuff.
Participation.
Yeah. Sorry. That's clear. So I'm going to, hopefully you can, I'm gonna zoom in here. But this is the northern two properties north of Rosedale Street. You can kind of see that property line there, so you can see there's a lot of wetlands on this project. There's a lot of high groundwater on this project. What they're proposing is 31 residential lots along a public street up to the very northeast corner of the lots of the cul-de-sac, and then tying into Rosedale Street. So I'm going to zoom in down here at the end of Rosedale Street. They're proposing each one of these 31 lots have a grinder pump or a low pressure system. And you can see this, that's the low pressure force main is identified here under FM, that line work called FM. Again, discharging and connecting to that same manhole that we showed on our wastewater comprehensive plan. So that's what they were proposing when they first came in and started talking sewer connections with us. Section 5D of our public works standards allows for low pressure systems. It says that they can be installed and considered in situations where there's high groundwater table or topographic conditions that make gravity sewer impractical. Wastewater comp plan and the public works standards also say that you're supposed to flow by gravity wherever feasible. What's feasible? Well, the city tends to be the ones, since it's our sewer system, we tend to be the ones that say, make a determination of what's feasible. Why, one of the reasons why we're here today is to talk to the city council about specifics about this. Answer questions that you might have, get some general guidance of where council might be going, and bring back a resolution at a later date for council to consider to either go with an option or not, for that we're outlining here today. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm gonna go into the next option because I'm gonna run through these options. Well, this is option one. It wasn't outlined in the technical memo because HDR did not provide an analysis of the low pressure system, grinder pump system. That was something that was just would be designed by the developer. Yes,
Grinder pump at each residence.
grinder pump at each residence.
31 of them.
There'd be 31 grinder pumps, one for each residence. And when looking at these options, the intent is that any of these options would be something that the developer would construct, whether it's grinder pump in each resident and force main in the roadway and discharge into the city's existing gravity sewer system. Or option two, lift station, option three, lift station, option four, lift station. They would design, permit, and construct those options. And in the case of options 2, 3, or 4, hand it over to the city, bill of sale essentially. When it's done, the city would own, operate, and maintain it from that point forward.
So the residents would be operating and maintaining their grinder pumps until someday when somebody says, City of Gig Harbor, you gotta take these over.
Exactly.
31 extra grinder pumps on
Yes.
private properties.
Yes, and so that's one of the things that I want to make sure that council is aware of, is that right now that's the intent, is that 31 property owners will be operating on grinder pumps the way it is today for grinder pumps in the city of Gig Harbor. We have, I don't know how many, but many grinder pumps that are on properties that are below. If we have Soundview Drive, for example, Soundview Drive's up here, photographically, people living down the water have to pump their sewer up to the, we have one. There you go.
North Harbor.
Absolutely, Harborview Drive. I'm not gonna get into the details of why, about the grinder pumps and the city's approach to grinder pumps yet. I will. But we did have, HDR come in and take a look at the 3 options with the lift stations, not with the intent of designing anything, but only with the intent of saying, is it feasible? I mean, to do that check to say, wow, that depth is too much for us to handle in terms of option 2, that's essentially what that is. Or how much capacity is available in the pipe if we do what we're showing here today. So that was the intent of the tech memo. So I'm just going to run through some of the images and we'll go through those options. This is option 1, of course, as proposed by the applicant. This is option 2. And I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, but just so you can orient yourself. This is option 2. This is essentially exactly what is called out in the city's wastewater comprehensive plan as it sits today. Property would develop. Gravity sewer would be installed. It would run south to Rosedale Street. It would head west along Rosedale Street and then head south all the way down to where the station 18 was originally established in that map that we looked at earlier. And then there'd be a force main that would take the sewer pressure and discharge it into this manhole up here in the schoolhouse line. So I don't know if you want me to zoom in, but that's essentially the overview of what we're talking about here.
So are the houses on this new proposed road, are they above the sewer line? Can the houses gravity flow into whatever they put in the street and then it gets down to where we can pump it back up and force main it?
Yes, the intent was that the gravity sewer that would be under options 2, 3, or 4, gravity sewer that would be installed would be able to flow or receive sewer from each house by gravity and without grinder pumps. So option 2, 3, and 4, no grinder gas, only option 1. Well, unless there's something different that I need. Okay, thanks. So, so that's option 2, essentially what the wastewater comprehensive plan states today. This is option 3. In this option, the city has looked at having a lift station at the southernmost end of the plat, closest to Rosedale Street, just because topographically the north end is slightly higher than the south end. And so we would have all properties also flowing by gravity to the gravity main flows down to the south and then gets to a lift station, pumps the sewer up and over the hill into Schoolhouse Lane. Any questions on this one?
That would be a shorter reach for us, right? We just have to put it in this station and then put it over to schoolhouse, right?
Correct. You'd have one gravity main flowing into this lift station, and then a fairly short pressure main going forward.
Versus option two, we had to go all the way down to the other lift station, and then come all the way back up.
Correct, correct. And then lastly, option 4, which would centralize the lift stations, because of course, on any gravity sewer main, you have to have flow in the pipe, you have to have slow. So instead of having one very long pipe that was shown in option 3, that would be having to drop lower and lower and lower into this essentially saturated ground, it has a high groundwater table. This would not require the invert, the low spot of the pipes going into the lift station to be as low, because you're coming from both ends instead of coming one longer run from north to south. So, but as Councilmember Henderson was alluding to in the previous one, now your force main, it runs from the lift station all the way down to the Platte and then over to here. So, those are the 4 options. Just a reminder, I'm going to jump back up to the one that's in the comprehensive plan. We are not opposed to looking at, and we do this in various locations throughout the city, where we look at developing a basin in steps. And I'll give you a very quick here, I'll stop sharing this, but I'll leave it. But we have, I'll just give you the lift station 8, basin 8, that's along Point Fosdick. So that essentially, that basin takes sewer from up near the north end, Lumberman, Probill, all the way south to essentially the library. It takes sewer in that basin along Point Fosdick. Lift station 8 was constructed, but we knew when lift station 8 was constructed, that at some point in the future, we would construct another lift station 8 further down the basin, lower, further south, because then lift station 8A or whatever the next one in line is, could then collect sewer from Quail Park, Fairway Estates, the school down there, and the Platte, there's a residential Platte right down there. And so this lift station 8A or B or whatever would be further south, and then we would have that new lift station built lower topographically in the basin, and then abandon the next one, the previous one that was built previously. And that way we still only have a sewer basin that only has one lift station, one to operate and maintain. So the theory was we could do this possibly in this location under option 2, but the only qualifier on that is then all of a sudden we do have those gravity sewer mains that are really deep, and we still don't want to go back to that. So we could do option 2, except for staff won't recommend it because of the very deep gravity sewer mains.
How deep is the gravity feed on option 3?
Let me, Stephanie, do you recall what HDR's analysis said on that?
I want to say 20 max.
Yeah, which
Can
is
you repeat the question? It was a little hard to understand it all. It was a little fuzzy.
on option 3, what's the maximum depth of the gravity sewer mains? That's it. Yeah. I don't, it says don't have it up.
But it's small.
Yeah, it's nominal.
It's about 20 feet.
So,
Yeah.
City engineer.
Yeah, it was, they have a 30-foot of head used for option 3. I'm not seeing more than that written in there though from HDR.
yeah. Well, it's tolerable for us, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so stop sharing now. So that's a quick overview of the options. I wanted to give the applicant time to present why they feel option 1 is the best recommended choice on this. They're going to be available to ask questions too. And then I'm going to jump back in and talk about why staff is recommending option 3. So, yes, I wrote it.
Well, there's maybe a couple engineers on council that You guys are the experts. I would be interested in knowing what option does staff recommend?
I will end with that. Okay. Yeah, and I do, before you guys jump in, I'm sorry, I want to note, when we're talking about some of these basins, I can bring an image back up, but just basin 18 discharges into basin 3. So when it comes to questions on capacity for basin 3, any of these options that are presented, 1, 2, 3, or 4, all have the same outcome. Sewer from basin 18 discharges into basin 3. Basin 3 receives sewer from every sewer basin in the city, then that gets pumped up. So there isn't a question of should we pump it into basin 18 or sorry, pump basin 18 into basin 3. That's an option, or that's what's happening in every option. Okay.
Except for the,
The differences in how we pump it in.
Yes, it's the mechanism.
and the capacity of the line, because option 2, which was the one we don't want, leads to less full line. Options 3 and 4, it's 86% full.
Yeah.
Which might mean we couldn't expand on that system much at all in the future. If somebody built another plant just on the other side, said, hey, we want to connect here, how about it? We're at 86%, if we get any I.
Well, here's the thing, I mean, that's true.
Yeah,
Some of those pipe sections that were shown in that technical memo that are where the little lowercase d over d, that's the percent full capacity of the pipe. If we are at a point where we have one section of pipe, and when I say one section of pipe, I'm talking between manhole and manhole. Let's say it's a 200-foot section of pipe, and if that is near capacity, if the d over d, because we have a developer that wants to tie into something else and add flows to that, we can just say, okay, yeah, you can do that, but you've got a restriction here between these two manholes. You're gonna have to take that 8-inch pipe and increase it to a 12-inch pipe. Then that issue goes away.
yeah.
And so that's a mitigation that the other upstream property owner can do to make that work for them, either them or us in the future if we have issues. So. Okay, sorry. Do you guys would like to go ahead? Give a quick summary of your option.
And if we need to move, Stephanie can't hear them.
I'm Catherine Jerkovich from the Congressman Consulting. I'm the agent for the applicant. And I appreciate, Jeff's presentation and the work that the city has done along with HDR. However, we just received this information last Friday, so we haven't had much time, if any, to go and review and digest it. We haven't seen any of the background information that HDR produced in order to verify what their assumptions are and recommendations. And so, we would like to ask that council give us a little bit more time on this and not push this thing forward for any type of recommendation or action at this time, and give us the opportunity to review it, digest it, and then have a meeting with staff to further discuss it. And Kyle Rose from Contour is here, and he can talk to any of the technical points of any on our side if you have any questions for him. But we also think, I guess I'll go back and say that option 1, we believe is a viable option, and we feel that it should be fully vetted as well. As you mentioned, grinder pumps are used in other places here in the city, and we believe that it should be under consideration as a viable option for the Rosedale flag.
Jeff, is there any reason that we wouldn't want to give them more time?
I'm not opposed to giving them more time. I don't, the intent of HDR's technical memo was to simply take the option and see if there was existing downstream capacity. Again, I know we had discussions early on about, well, design features and everything else. HDR was never intending to design anything in there. It's just based on flows, is there capacity in a downstream analysis? I don't think there was anything except for maybe as close as what Councilmember Henderson was saying, in that pipe full, 86% pipe full situation where there was an issue. The city doesn't have any issues with what HDR prepared at all. Nothing is a red flag that says this option is not acceptable. So all four options per HDR's technical memo are acceptable. So I don't know analysis further in the technical memo would give you.
I'm just thinking that they haven't had a chance to look at it. And as far as your technical presentation, maybe that would change after you had a chance to look at
Definitely,
it.
yeah, because we
So-
didn't, we haven't seen the modeling that HDR used. Correct, Pat?
Correct, and I guess our, I think big item was that option one wasn't included on the technical memo, so it would have been nice to see. The pipe capacity on the low pressure system versus, the lift stations. And if it would be, how much lower, is generally be lower.
Yeah, okay, well, we don't need, I mean, if council wants to give them time to review it, I don't know what benefits there would be to put option one into the technical memo and into analysis of downstream pipe capacity, because you're talking about the same sewer flows regardless.
Yeah,
Although it's only the option two versus options 3 and 4 that really have much difference, because you're adding more houses.
Sure, well, so the biggest difference would be when a lift station kicks on, it's kicking it on for the entire basin all at once. Whereas with the low pressure systems, you have a couple houses kicking on, 1 hour here, 1 hour later. And so instead of having one big flow all at once, you had it kind of spread out essentially.
Exactly, and yeah, Stephanie does have input on here, so that's Stephanie's, yeah. So just one quick second, Stephanie, just to be clear, even at the worst case scenario, you have a lift station that will kick on and it will flow all of that volume all at once. Even at that worst case scenario, capacity of the pipe is still adequate. So I'm assuming with the capacity of the pipe with individual grinder pumps, there'd be even more capacity, because of exactly like you said, the flows will be more sporadic and not surged. But even at the surged condition of grinder of the lift station kicking on, and we don't have an issue with that. Sure. So Stephanie, go ahead.
So the question was asked why they didn't receive the information earlier. We did not receive the information until late Monday, the 3rd, and at that time I was out of the office until Thursday. And so I sent it right away. So they've had the week to look at it, but we also never asked HDR to run option one because of all the grinder pumps and the city's stance on adding additional grinder pumps to the system if gravity is available and an option. And in this case, gravity is an option. So we did not ask them to run the grinder pump option. So that is not why it's not included in the technical memo from HDR. So I hope that helps clarify a little bit.
So
Thank you, Stephanie.
that's what I was gonna ask is, we're not advocating as a city for grinder pump if we can use the gravity. Is that what I'm hearing?
If it's feasible.
Correct.
Correct.
The comprehensive plan and public works standards say that we need to be using gravity wherever feasible, and I can go into that a little bit. I was gonna talk about why option one is not the staff's preferred option, and I can talk about that in a minute.
I think what I would recommend is that we let staff present what their recommendation would be and hear that, and then that may answer some of council's questions. And in that, you may want to, is this the decision, you want to talk about where this decision goes after this, is it going to council meeting, et cetera, yeah.
I was just gonna ask, when you present, can you give the cost benefit analysis of the different options, in particular to the city and to maintenance over time? If that's a part of the recommendation, which I imagine it is for option 3.
I will, you might be surprised at that answer, but,
I know.
Well, I think the thing to remember too, the grinder pumps, those would all be maintained, by each of the homeowners in the plat, as opposed to it being maintained by the city, so it's going to be there's a cost benefit there for the city alone. So there would be owned and operated, we could have an HOA that would own and operate and the individual, be responsible for the individual grinder pumps.
Well, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and finish your presentation and unless there's questions that are not related, okay. So if you can hold those till the.
Yeah. I'd like
Did you have
to-
anything else you want to say?
Yeah, a few things. So as Jeff mentioned, I mean, we're in support of option one, which is the grinder pumps. The biggest item on that is mostly for cost feasibility. You know, if we're putting in a lift station on the Rosedale plat, it's a temporary system until the final lift station, as Jeff mentioned, we would put in. Once that would be put in, the original lift station would be abandoned. So you're essentially throwing $1 million at a lift station to abandon it in some time later. As well as the fact that if the lift station is put in on the Rosedale plat, the plat is required to front that cost. That's not something the plat can afford. That essentially kills the plat. In comparison, if you're doing grinder pumps, you're talking $10,000 per lot to put in a grinder pump. Those are privately maintained, privately owned, and generally there's no reason for those to be given over to public system. Even if a permanent lift station is put in, those are typically still owned and operated and maintained by the individual lots. As well as Jeff mentioned, I mean, having the lift station go down to the bottom of lot, or 56th Street, I believe it was, like I said, 35, 40-foot deep sewer, it's not really feasible, in those regards. You're talking, again, 4,000 feet of pipe at 30 feet plus, versus 400 feet of low pressure system offsite. So that's really where we're at, is it has the least impact to neighboring properties, infrastructure, as well as it's the least cost prohibitive for both the plat itself as well as the city, as the city has no maintenance responsibilities on those.
Okay. So I was gonna then proceed with providing council with a summary of why staff's not recommending option one and instead recommending option three, because from everything they've said, sounds like a reasonable option.
Jeff, if council were to make a recommend or decide on a preferred alternative today, what happens after that? Is this going to a council meeting for their further approval, or there be further option for comment?
Yeah, so just so jumping ahead to what the next steps are gonna be is that wastewater comprehensive plan technical amendments are adopted by council through resolution. So depending on outcome, direction we receive, we would be coming back to council with a resolution in the near future. A resolution is available under new business for public comment, and we would be able to have more conversations with the applicant at that time also, when the resolution is presented to council.
Thank you.
So, again, grinder pumps seems like generally a good alternative for the city. But I want to make sure that there are a few reasons why staff does not support grinder pumps. Again, there's a reason why we want to have gravity sewer wherever feasible. Grinder pumps, low pressure systems, they fail in 4 different ways. Electricity goes out. The pump itself gets plugged or failed. The motor is plugged or failed, or the pressure main, the force main is plugged or failed. So you got 4 means that system can fail. In a gravity sewer, there's only one way it can fail. It gets plugged. If it's a public facility, we have, and Chick Screw does it all the time, go through and we know where there are potential areas because pipes are set so flat in grade that they can be more likely to plug. And so they have those under maintenance, but that's our responsibility. And we have a maintenance program that we go through and we identify and we work with that. So the likelihood of gravity sewer pipe plugging is very low. And so that's one of the reasons why we always try and go for gravity sewers wherever feasible. grinder pumps also, low pressure systems, would be private. The city right now, though the ecology has a different approach for different jurisdictions, depending on how each jurisdiction implements their own agreements. But right now, each individual property owner would have its own grinder pump. There'd be a force main, so we'd have to have agreement between the city and grinder pump owners. We'd have to have an agreement between the city and whoever's gonna operate and maintain the force main. This is not a commercial site. So if it has homeowner associations tend to go away. And so who do we have that agreement with in the future? We're gonna have it with between the city and 31 individual property owners about who's gonna operate and maintain that grinder pump and the force main that is in public right of way. That force main would not be the city's. We have a very similar situation where we have a private residential group, 50 people.
Yeah, little.
And they maintain their force main for many miles and it comes into the city's gravity sewer system. Until it touches the gravity sewer system, it's theirs to operate and maintain. They've had failures. They get in, this is in the county now, but they have to deal with the county with these failures. It's not easy to get that group of homeowners together when it's 5, 10, 15 and more years down the road. When it's brand new, probably not an issue. And so the city doesn't want to have that question of who's responsible to operate and maintain. But then there's the question that ecology is asking us is, well, why doesn't the city own and operate these? Well, because we don't want grinders. We don't want to be able to have to go on and maintain somebody's own grinder pump on their property and talk about, well, electrical breaker, did a breaker trip? Did that cause the issue? Well, that's your issue, not ours. It gets into a quagmire of liability. And so the city just wants to make a very clear cut of what is ours and what is theirs, what is the property owner. But ecology has the ability to require the city to take over all grinder pumps. They haven't yet because we've been managing our grinder pump connections adequately. But that can change at any point. So we just want to make it very clear that we have, if it does change, we have the fewest number of grinder pumps available. Where we have allowed grinder pumps in very rare circumstances where gravity sewer is also feasible, we make the developer put in a dry gravity sewer. We're talking about this a little bit with 38th Avenue roadway improvements and the dry sewer and the connection and the Box Run. Box Run has dry sewer and they have grinder pumps. At some point, they're going to have to turn those off once a developer builds lift station 10. But that is for a large basin that has many houses associated with it, not just the Box Run pond. So it's a little bit different. And for reference, staff did not recommend that Box Run have grinder pumps on it either. But so staff is also anticipating at some point in the future that this proposed under option 3 lift station would not be temporary, it would be permanent, because as we've discussed, that lifts the gravity sewer that would need to connect the area of the Rosedale Plat to the very south end of Basin 18 as shown in the comp plan. You've got to have very deep gravity sewer mains. We're not proposing that. What's going to probably happen is that the next iteration of the wastewater comprehensive plan is going to divide Basin 18 into 2 separate basins, because it's just not feasible to have gravity sewer that deep. So if built, the lift station that's proposed in option 2 or option 3 or option 4, whichever one that is, if that's the way the city goes, that would be the permanent lift station location. It wouldn't be.
So in fact, there's no difference between an interim lift station and a permanent.
In this case, I don't see for options 3 or 4.
It's not like it's built with thinner walls or smaller pumps. Same
Yeah,
thing.
it's the same.
It's just
Yeah.
terminology.
Same.
It might be replaced someday with another lift station somewhere else.
But in this case, we wouldn't.
Okay, so that would be permanent.
Councilor
So just to understand in that last comment that you made about the lift station. If they provided the lift station, and I understand what you're saying from this costing. And then we were taking it over at some point, if I understand how this process works, would the city then be obligated for any payment to that association or homeowners for taking over that lift station or not? So if the homeowners are saying that's just for the state, they're gonna put a lift station in, they're gonna spend $1 million. We're still saying it's not ours to deal with, you're gonna connect into our sewer lines, but it's not ours to connect with until at some point we say we're willing to take it over. Is that, am I following this?
The start of that is
Okay.
correct. What would happen is as soon as the lift station and the gravity sewer were deemed physically complete, a bill of sale will be written up. It would become the city's to operate, maintain, and own.
When you
So
say bill of
transfer.
sale, are we paying any
No,
financial, we're just taking,
just
over-
taking
we're
over,
taking over
yeah.
the long-term cost of things, right?
right, exactly. It becomes,
Yeah,
yeah, it becomes ours to operate, own, operate, and maintain from that point forward. So developer does the initial investment to construct, design, construct, install. And then as soon as it achieves physical completion, we take ownership over and then would operate, maintain it. There are operations and maintenance costs that would be incurred by the city. All those operations and maintenance costs are factored in to our utility rates, our general facilities charges, and anticipated as part of our wastewater comprehensive plan. When we say we're gonna put a lift station at this location, we anticipate that we're going to be paying to have our staff and equipment to operate. Maintain.
here's a weird question. If they put in the lift station, and then subsequently we take over the maintenance and all that with the bill of sale, is there a method in which that we could charge that particular group of homes a much higher rate to amortize the costs? I don't know if you see what I'm going here, because if $1 million is gonna stop the whole project, that's, say, if I heard correctly, is there a way in which there's a different means to pay for this, so it's not $1 million upfront?
Another way that could do, though I haven't seen it done for a green development, I've seen this where properties are already developed, but a utility local improvement district. So it would be where the city would come in and construct the sewer. Modify it, adjust it a little bit, but, and so I don't know, Daniel, if you're familiar with anything like that for a new development, but we could potentially have a utility local improvement district created where the city would finance it and then get payments back, and hold those payments. I believe they're held against the individual properties themselves, like put on the title or against the property. Dan, okay.
Daniel, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I
Do you-
think the answer to that is I don't know that off the top of my head, and so I could work with Jeff to look into see whether that's feasible.
Okay, great.
And so let's talk about the depth of this equipment, right? Because from what I understand, we talked about 40 feet.
And that's option 2.
That's option 2. We're not recommending option 2.
Okay, so it's not 40 feet for either option 1, 3, or 4.
Correct. I think we said option 2 was about 20 feet. Or sorry,
Right.
3.
3 is about 20 feet, right? And that's the same for option 1 as well.
Well, option 1 is force main. It only needs to go as deep as what's required for coverage, which is 3.5 feet of coverage.
Okay, and option 4 then would also be 20 feet, 20-ish feet.
I think it'd be a little less, but I'm not sure. Stephanie has her hand raised.
Yeah, so I pulled up the option maps that were provided by Contour, and option 3 has the max depth at 26.
20 feet.
The shallowest at 22. Option 4, they have at 17.5 with the lift station in the back. And the front. 1 minute. Roughly 8 feet, 8 to 10 feet, so a little shallower, but for that one.
Well, when gravity sewer mains get below 25 feet, manholes get below 25 feet, we have a different standard that we go by, but it doesn't mean we can't do it. It just is a different standard. So, I mean, if there's a few sections where it's 26 feet, that's not a big deal. Most of
Right.
it's 12. Quite a few of our mains are 15 feet deep. That's 20 feet. It's not unusual. Councilmember Roder.
It's, a regular general lift station, not like the Taj Mahal, #6. They run like 2.5 million, wouldn't they? More than $1 million.
In today's dollars, it could be closer to $2 million, but that includes gravity main, that includes force mains, yeah.
So that's the 31 residents, that's like, $55,000 per,
Pretty close, yeah.
per lot.
Yeah.
I can say, and I'll tell you my opinion now, is not grinder. It's option 3, but I'm also in favor of giving them 2 weeks to investigate option 3 and be sure that it won't fit into their finance. But I am against grinders for all the reasons you mentioned. Go ahead.
Okay, I had one other question, and I'm not sure that it even applies to this situation. But what we're asking for is for this development to pay for this new lift station and the system, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't provide that. All of these options would have the developer pay for the design and construction.
So what happens if, say, somebody else comes in and they want to put 33 more homes just to the west of this development? Do they pay? How does that get figured in?
Good question. I mean,
Is there a latecomers fee?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm wondering is,
that could be an option, but in order to have a latecomers, you have to set it up at the time prior to transferring the lift station over to the city for ownership. You would have to get
Okay.
all that set up, and there's a whole process. Happy to go through that with everybody if that's of interest.
because there would be more capacity in that lift station would have more capacity than these 33 homes are giving to it. I don't know the capacity of a lift station, or
Well,
I can write about it, but I can't.
there's things that we could do to increase capacity of the lift station to some degree if we had more homes. It would all really hinge on the pipe size and the invert elevation of the lift station. So this basin includes this area to the west. This area to the west is slightly higher in elevation. We did not have HDR model this area to the west because we knew that if the lift station was up here as it is in option 4, that it was very unlikely that sewer flows could go to this lift station
Okay.
here or this flow from here would have to go down to this lift station down here.
Okay,
We would just, essentially, what I anticipate is, though, without doing all the modeling, I can't say for sure, is that if we were to go with option 3 or 4, we would, like I said, we'd split this basin. Where we would split it, I don't know if it'd be Rosedale Street, or I don't know if it would be right along this north-south line. It would be one or the other, but if we go with options 3 or 4, we're going to split the basin, and where that is, we'd have to figure that out.
okay.
Councilor.
Yeah, and this is actually for either, the developer or you, what is the cost difference between option 1 and option 3 potentially to them? I mean, are we talking $100,000 or are we talking several million dollars?
Oh,
So a typical grinder pump is install cost is roughly $10,000. You're talking 10,000 times 31 lots.
plus the portion.
Plus the portion, but just looking at the equipment itself, not including any of the piping or anything. The grinder pumps are 10,000, a lift station, depending on the requirements of it, you're looking at anywhere between $1 million to $3 million. So I would say the lift station by itself is, 3 to 10 times as much.
And, go ahead,
I
Councilor.
have a question you may not have the answer for. But these homes, if there's 31 homes, I want to know the impact that $55,000 would have on each home. Are these $1.5 million homes or are they $700,000 homes?
We don't know yet.
Yeah, well, if you don't know yet, I'm not trying to be smart, but if you don't know yet, why don't you put that $55,000 down?
That,
You know,
that's a conversation.
and that's how you
with
make
our
it feasible, is you charge more for that.
Council, I,
Yeah, and, sorry,
go ahead.
I didn't want.
you may, we may be tracking on this. In the interest of time, if
Yeah.
we're going,
Yeah.
because we have two other potential longer items. What, I want to know what you need from council first. And then if there is consensus to provide more time for the applicant to review everything else, when would we then need to bring this back to council? And would it be a study session again, or would it be at a council meeting?
What,
And then what? And then
I have a
what we were gonna
recommendation,
say.
maybe.
So just to throw this out there, and if there's enough nods for going forward with what staff suggested or another option. Combining that into a council bill will take at least 2 weeks to get to a council meeting. And so if staff brings that forward to a council meeting, there would be opportunity for public comment. And for council to look at this option and hear additional testimony on if an additional option would be considered.
What I would like to do is follow what Katrina's saying, because we would be able to bring this back to give the applicant more time to provide responses. Is to bring it back at the May 8th city council meeting, the resolution. But give the applicant time to provide a memo that would provide a couple things. One is analysis of HDR's tech memo. Two is to provide possibly some costs. Because again, not putting them on the spot, but what's the cost of what's their anticipated cost for option 3 versus option 1? Kyle said what the cost of the grinder pump would be, but we need to throw in there what the cost of the force main would be, because if it's $15,000 per lot and the lift station is $55,000 a lot, well, then council can say, okay, well, now we know the difference, $40,000 per lot. So then maybe what we do is have an agenda bill. The agenda bill as an exhibit would include the memo from the applicant to present their review and additional information. That's what I would recommend.
Is there a possibility of some other scenario that might be a compromise between 1 and 3? That wouldn't result in 31, but maybe not result in one lift station, maybe 2 small ones.
I don't know if there'd be any benefit for the cost to the developer. The city staff would rather have one lift station
Yeah.
to maintain instead of 2. I will leave that up to the applicant if they want to propose
I would
that.
assume doing some sort of half and half would just make it more expensive than either option.
Okay, it's just a thought, give you an option.
If you're looking for consensus, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
But Daniel also look into what Julie suggested and just provide us some numbers if as well.
Well, I think, yeah, Daniel and I can have a conversation about it, but I can,
Is your
what was-
recommendation against that? Is that-
not necessarily. I don't know if there would be much benefit. Typically, we look at utility local improvement districts where somebody's converting and where we focused in the past, was where somebody's converting on-site septic to sewer system connections, and we need to build the infrastructure. So these houses are existing already and they need to convert over. It's really gonna be very expensive, and they're not included as part of a purchase price. It's now, you own your home, you're paying for it, and now you have this additional cost at $55,000. We just use that. And that's a huge change to what somebody has when they're already paying for a few $100,000 house.
Sure, sure. And that's helpful.
And they probably can't put it on their mortgage.
Right, yeah.
Easier to put it.
Yeah. But we can have a quick conversation with Daniel, have a quick response to that. And then if
I just have one other quick question. You mentioned having the city take ownership of the grinder pumps at some point in the future as a possibility. Do you have any number or like a percentage or anything of those that you've done already that you've taken ownership of?
in the city,
Yeah,
none in the city, but there are jurisdictions out there that do operate, and maintain grinder pumps. And it's something that ecology looks very close to that.
Sure, okay.
I mean, again, we're short on time. If we were to take over grinder pumps, that would be a whole different discussion that we've already had in-house at staff level of what it would take if we were to start taking over grinder pumps. And the short answer is, we're gonna have a surcharge for everybody we take over a grinder pump on, and it's gonna cost everybody who owns a grinder pump more for us to operate and maintain.
Oh, goody. If you can put your recommendations in the memo when it comes forward, that'd be super
We will when it comes to council.
great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here
Thank you
and
for your time.
you're welcome. In the next couple of weeks, I'm sure there'll be more discussion between you and Jeff and the team. And so thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Council, do you desire a 5-minute break right now? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break or we will come back at 4:03.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, April 13th, 2023. The time is 4:04 p.m. and we are on our second discussion item, which is our emergency management overview. This is from our Police Chief Kelly Busey. Thanks for being here. In the interest of time, if council could write questions down and ask at the end of Kelly's presentation, that would be great. And then I also will have you raise your hands for questions, just to keep it the best timing possible, because we have less than an hour, so.
I will
Take it
be
away.
brief. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am going to be giving you a very high level overview of our emergency management plan. This topic was prompted by a question, I think, from council, just wondering aloud how prepared we were for quakes and natural disasters and civil unrest and things. And so the goal here is just to assure you, we do have some plan available. I think we're in a good response mode, but there are some other factors that we'll be considering as we move forward. So with that, Tiffany, I'll just give you the little something like that. So our comprehensive management for emergency management plan, or CEMP, has several parts to it. And it starts with a base plan that really kind of provides an overview of our structure of our city, how we're set up, what resources we might have available to respond, and how we would interact with other agencies around us. It also has an emergency declaration template available. So if something were to happen in America, proclaim an emergency and certain other things change, we'll cover that. So the next section is what we call emergency support functions. There are 15 categories of general things that we have to consider in the event of an emergency, like who's going to be responsible for transportation or energy or public safety and security. They're not specific to any single event. They're just kind of a, hey, you might want to think about this sort of a stuff. Each of those emergency support functions is actually fairly brief, 8 pages maybe each, but kind of a checklist of who's doing what and who's responsible for what. Then we have some support annexes that give us some specific instructions as a city. So for instance, how do we track our finances, or who's going to be doing public information, and what's a good template to use to get information out to the city and the again, some more emergency declarations are available in there. Other things like how do we manage volunteers or donations? I mean, in the event of a widespread disaster, you'd be surprised who comes out of the woodwork to want to donate things you may or may not want, right? Or how do we vet volunteers to see if it's appropriate that we put them into action? So that's in the support annexes. Then we have the incident annexes, and these are much more specific. This is what's going to happen in the event of these things. The pandemic one came into play recently, you may have heard. And so that plan, I'm sure, is going to be largely rewritten at at least the county level. But there are other things that are included for very specific things. The one that really I focus in on is oil spill, for instance. We're very protective of our bay and our harbor. So we actually have a plan in place for where we would deploy booms, how would we get them out there, and how we would respond to that to protect our bay. So let's start with the Pierce County plan for a moment, though. And it's based largely in state law, but it basically says that cities will provide emergency management functions for their jurisdictions, and that all incidents begin locally, meaning, hey, Gig Harbor, you try to solve this yourself. And then if you need some help, go ahead and reach out. When we do get overwhelmed, we would then go ahead and start asking up the chain for additional resources, all the way up to the federal government. So a couple of terms, and I'll tell you, when you get into the land of emergency management, they love their acronyms much more than even the military, but I'm only going to familiarize you with,
Sorry.
or I'm sorry.
That's hard to believe.
It's hard to believe, but in fact, when I deal with our local liaison at Pierce County, I charge her a nickel every time she charges. So, but National Incident Management System is a result of 9/11, actually. We learned during that process that agencies didn't talk to each other very well. There was no forethought into how we, how is a neighboring jurisdiction going to communicate with another. That's also resulted, by the way, in our countywide radio systems that we're trying to get into one at one point through South Sound 911. ICS is Incident Command System. We're going to walk you through that here in just a second. Emergency Operations Center, and then what's called the MAC, the Multi-Agency Coordination Center. It's something that's a little bit unique to the Key Peninsula and Gig Harbor Peninsulas that we do very well out here. So here's what the Pierce County EOC looks like. It's down by the Pierce County Annex. Familiar with that, in South 35th Street, I think it is. Very nice, very modern, well thought out building. The operations room is the upper left photo, and then the Joint Information Center is the upper right photo. This is staffed by a regular skeleton staff at all times, but it's activated a lot more than you know. It'll be activated for a missing child, for instance, or an anticipated wind event, or civil unrest, things like that. So that's a resource that's available to us. And they're highly supportive. They're ready to help us at a moment's notice, get out things, messaging through Everbridge, those very focused text messages that we can put out. So that's who we would initially ask for assistance from. Instead, we have what's called yes,
The Everbridge messages, those are the ones that we get for traffic accidents and all that kind of thing as well.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we do out here is we've established a multi-agency coordination center. And in talking with, in fact, the executive director for Pierce County DEM, they like this model. And so what we've done is we've taken representatives from agencies and organizations wider than just our city, and we put them all together basically in a room up at the fire district headquarters near the women's prison. There's a dedicated room up there that looks like a very mini EOC that you saw from Pierce County. It's got some earthquake resistance built into it, some redundant communications and power. And so we have two tiers to the MAC, if you will. And so if we anticipate an event like a big snow event, for instance, is common, we'll activate tier 1 and we'll send representatives up there to see how we're going to handle it, who needs to actually be in the room, who needs to be on call, and just make sure we've got all of our bases covered. We haven't actually had to activate it a lot in the last several years. We're way overdue, but it's an effective way of dealing with that. You can see tier 2 includes other things, notably Peninsula Amateur Radio, right? And communications get wiped out here. And for some reason, cellular goes down. We can communicate at least with Pierce County DEM through the amateur radio network. We can even go down into like Chapel Hill Church, which is our designated emergency emergency shelter for our city, right? So we can invite them into the MAC and work that way. It's really a neat deal because obviously we're almost on an island, if you will. The bridge always gets taken out of play in some of these disasters when we do a drill. So we function as our own. We report then to Pierce County's DEM, and that it really works very well. So let's walk our way through what an incident command system would look like. Some of you who've been exposed to military might be familiar with some of this, but we start with an incident commander, and then initially we need some workers, some operations people to go out and accomplish the task or deal with whatever the situation is. We need to have somebody that's a planner to say, what's our overall strategy? In the case of, say, a collapsed building, we need to shore up the building, then go in and do rescue, that sort of thing. So we need to map that out in advance and let the operations people do that. Logistics, hey, we need some large dump trucks to remove debris if an overpass collapses, things like that. So we have a team of people assigned to find those things. We need a helicopter, we need a water transportation, whatever, they can find those resources. And then, of course, we need to keep track of the bills. A lot of these things in a state of emergency are reimbursable. And so part of our emergency management plan keeps us FEMA compliant so that we're eligible for those funds in a state of emergency. So From that, we can keep branching out. We can add in a public information officer and how we want to distribute information. A safety officer is important, right? To kind of have overall, hey, stop, what you're doing isn't safe. And then a liaison officer. So for instance, we would maybe want to talk to a neighboring jurisdiction, say Keep Peninsula or Kitsap County, and to liaise with them. Hey, are we on the same page? What do you need? What do we need? How can we work together for that? We can build this whole incident command structure out as far as we want. We can keep adding positions to accomplish things. This is the org chart for how I used to get my son out of bed and to school on time. Okay, so we have employed those sorts of tactics. So in the city level, or I'm sorry, in the MAC level first, this is representative of what that might look like if we stood up the MAC for a wind event or a snow event or something like that. It could look like this. We're pulling people from all of the organizations to fill those roles. Doesn't matter where you're from, but we all work very well together. Remember too, that as I kind of just alluded to, we could be communicating with, say, a regional command post, Pierce County, maybe even the state military department that runs the things at a state level for us. So all of these command posts can report to incident command and then an area command. So there's always kind of a structure available to us. At a city level, if we had to stand up our own EOC, say in this very room, this could be what something would look like. If it were a longer term event, right, we can assign people and they would change. Maybe the incident commander is our building official. If we have a widespread earthquake and buildings are flattened, right, it could be them leading the charge or putting them in charge of planning. And so these are very fluid. We have trained some of our staff in the ICS model. I think that it's been many years since we've done that, and we're going to hopefully renew that very soon. As far as your ICS knowledge, your incident command, has anybody ever had that NIMS training? I'm sure Councilman, many of you have. Oh, this is good. Councilmember, were you around when we did one for all elected officials? We did kind of introductory NIMS training.
I don't think so.
That may have been before your first
Yeah.
year, so.
Oh,
Was it that long ago? Okay. So, but that, again, that's what it could look like at a city level, and we could expand that out as needed. So the roles, that's what you might be interested in. The mayor really puts out rules and regulations usually on an emergency basis. It can do what it takes to obtain some vital supplies, can sort of help us get material. In a state of emergency, some of our finance rules change. We don't have to have the formal bid processes. We can go right out to purchase things around that. The only time I can recall in my time here that we put that in action was the Hanukkah Eve storm. I think it was 2006, where we were running low on fuel. And so we asked the 76 station right next door here, don't sell to the public, only sell to us. So that kept us going. I think that was about an 8-day event. So that was pretty lean. The role for the city administrator, of course, is to kind of direct traffic from within the city, keep things running, especially at the administrative level. Can be certainly acting at the policy level as well. Finance is pretty self-explanatory. Track the bills, see where we're spending the money, make sure that we're not doing anything completely illegal. The city council would approve funding. You'd maintain those controls over things like food and water. And I guess when we learned during COVID, toilet paper apparently is a commodity. I still don't understand that, but and just enact various policies, whether they be personnel policies, purchasing policies, things like that. If the mayor issues some sort of a proclamation or resolution or executive order, that has to be confirmed by council within 7 days, or else it's null and void. So the proclamations that are available are, again, the major one, the state of emergency, but curfews. I saw that Baltimore this week instituted some curfew for some civil unrest. I'm interested in tracking that. So they can shut down bars, discontinue sales of gasoline, firearms and ammunition, right? And again, as I put at the very bottom there, that all of those have to be approved by council within 7 days. We do have a continuity of operations plan here. If something very tragic were to happen and we were to lose some of you, you can appoint people to fill vacant city council offices by RCW. And then at the policy level, the mayor pro tem and city administrators, kind of the order, the pecking order there for who's in charge, changes just slightly at the administrative level. So the phases of emergency management, it sounds like some of you are familiar with this, are preparedness, mitigation, I'll talk about that more in just a second. Response, I put a gold star by that because I think we're very good at that. Okay, I'm not sure how we're doing on the others. I know we can do a little bit better at preparedness. And then the recovery options. How does a community recover from an event? Do we relax building codes just a little bit to get stores up and operating? Do we have loan programs, things like that? So recovery, and that could take a long time, right? So for mitigation, it's becoming a lot more complicated. It used to be the focus was on response. How are we going to respond to a wildfire or earthquake or something like that? Now it's trying to get ahead of that, and it's getting very finite. And I'll ask city administrator maybe to comment on some conversations that we've had recently internally. But we're talking about things like landslide areas or property values or determining building vulnerable buildings or even vulnerable populations. So there's a lot more to it than just planning your response. If there's a fire, what are we going to do, right? So emergency management itself is changing. I'll tell you that the emergency management director position is named the police chief here. It used to be the building official many years ago, and Chuck Hunter, Mayor Hunter changed that. Tell you the truth, I haven't had a lot of training in that. It's been trial by fire on the job training. I think I've got a good grasp of it, at least from the response angle, and I feel pretty comfortable in that role. But I think that we may want to look a little bit wider, and I'll maybe ask city administrator to jump in here.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. You're doing a fabulous job, and definitely think that you're the person that we would want maybe in charge of us in an emergency. But there are other things that the council's that are being brought up regionally, earthquakes, or urban interface wildfires, some of those things. And as Kelly so adequately mentioned, emergency management used to just be, okay, earthquakes, when's the big one? What are we gonna do? Well, we all know that that's shifting in terms of some of the climate events that we're seeing more often, ozone landslide, all of those things. And so as Kelly mentioned, in the mitigation portion, that's becoming a lot more planning, public works, GIS focused, less so emergency responder focused. So where Kelly has all the expertise necessary in that portion, we're looking in our organization at how and who are we going to pull together on this team so that we can adequately map out resources and how we can look to mitigate and prepare for all the different types of disasters. So we don't necessarily have the answers yet, but we're definitely talking about those. And Carl's been looped into that too, from a planning building perspective, and Jeff as well. For I think Kelly was coordinating on our routes. So Chief Doan was talking the other night about getting in and out of the harbor. So Mike Simmons has been working with Kelly to identify the primary routes that we would want to make sure that we have open. And so we really appreciate Kelly stepping up into this role and taking this on in trial by fire, but we're looking over, it's one of our goals to over the next year to fully solidify a team to work on this. And it may end up shifting from the chief of police to someone else, but that's unknown at this time.
Or some sort of team concept.
Yeah.
Back on the event. So, okay, I'm not sure if I have anything else beyond that. I guess questions.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's helpful.
When did we last update our plans?
Good question. I meant to tell you that at the outset. The plan was last updated in 2016.
Okay.
The plan is supposed to be updated every 4 years. We got a little grace during COVID. And then not too long ago, we were told that Pierce County's plan has been rewritten and it covers Gig Harbor. So that keeps us in line with FEMA, right? Our standards are good there. Recently reviewed that plan. I don't think it's adequate for us. And so I've been in communication with Pierce County to say, no, we're going to redo ours again to be Gig Harbor specific. And then they will adopt our plan as part of theirs. There are some other components to that we need to update. And that's where I'm going to be working with other members of the team, Public Works and things like that, to identify landslides and population concentrations and things like that. So the mitigation standards have to be updated too. So,
And it benefits us on a local level to get more finite in this for funding. So if we're able to identify potential hazards and mitigation, we're able to go forward with those because they're in an adopted plan.
And then there's occasionally funding available for those things.
Councilmember.
Two questions. Next Saturday at Gig Harbor High School,
Mhm.
there's going to be an open house, and what will happen there?
As I understand, it's an event coordinated by PEPC, the Peninsula Emergency Preparedness Coalition. And it's an emergency preparedness fair, so different exhibitors and how to use a fire extinguisher and what you should have in your earthquake kit in your home, like that. The police department will be represented, the city will be in some fashion. We're still working that out, actually, but it might be a little bit more water safety oriented, boating safety sort of thing.
Okay, so not so much about earthquakes or anything like that?
I think that's gonna be covered by other organizations.
Okay, but it will be there.
I'm guessing, yeah, Pepsi is very big into earthquake preparedness.
That's
so,
right.
yeah.
That's right.
And that was kind of built for areas like Fox Island and other more remote areas where they would need to potentially be on their own for longer than an urban area.
Yeah, and Fox Island does great with that. Second question, I guess that there was funding available from Senator Murray's office for planning this. Are we able to get any of that funding?
We're looking into that, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilmember.
So on the incident and annexes, I didn't see wildfires and earthquakes. That may not have been a complete list of.
That was actually, and fire is listed, firefighting is listed up there.
Oh, earthquake street. I didn't see it. I looked it up and down, but I'm sure. Ought to be on there.
Oh, she stopped sharing
Yeah,
the
she
screen,
does.
so.
Okay, that's all right. Well, anyway, and then the MAC tier 1, tier 2,
Uh-huh.
I didn't see Puget Sound Energy on there anywhere, the gas line.
Yeah, that's a good point. They do, we have
Okay.
a big plan up by the women's prison, and you're right. That's actually a great point. I don't know if we have the current contact.
Yeah, that'd be good.
The other addition on that would be the cell companies.
Yeah.
that have-
Yeah, I'm not sure that they would send a representative to the MAC
Yeah,
itself,
I don't know
but
if they
yeah,
would
we do
either.
have a resource list that we maintain to beyond what you see on the
Yeah.
screen of contacts at those places. Yeah.
Do we have satellite phone?
We did many, many, many years ago. I think it was in that closet right there. I can't even tell you if it's there.
That's what I'm thinking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, they do have them.
Really good to have.
Okay, so that'd be good. And then the other thing is if NIMS or ICS training, there's other state agencies that have people on board that I'm aware of. So we could probably get you, if people need training, we could probably do that maybe at a.
Oh, we have that available. Yeah, yeah, that's easy. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Councilmember.
I got two things. One, I didn't see it up there, but sometimes gets overlooked. And I know, I was really surprised once when I was involved in a search and rescue food. When you have people out there doing all these chores, no way to get food, you know, it's important. I was real surprised, when I was out on this, the LA Sheriff's Department showed up with this huge truck full of food and water and some kind of mystery juice. And it was, you know, something you don't think of, but those people have to be fed. And the other one is, what does 76 station say when you said you couldn't sell the gasoline to anybody else? I'm just curious about that.
I think they were fine with it. I think they understood the magnitude of it.
Okay.
There was some sort of special relationship set up between the city. I wasn't part of the conversation then. I was a sergeant level then. But I
Oh, that's great.
think it all worked out in the end, yeah.
But it's good to know that we have the ability to do that in case, you know, because we're gonna need, you know, public works trucks and police to be able to, and fire to be able to get gas to run.
Right, yeah, power was out in some areas here for 8 days. It was
Yeah, I
fine.
remember that.
And the fire department's, by the way, got the food thing down, let me tell you. Okay, so we're good there.
Councilmember Lincoln.
Yeah, do we do drills at all? Have we done any drills?
Not often enough, no. We participate kind of in the Great Shakeout,
Yeah.
right? And then there's the Cascadia Rising episode, you know, but I guess I can voice a little frustration there. Every time they plan that, I say, please, please, please don't take the Narrows Bridge out of play automatically. Just don't do that. And every year they write the scenario of the Narrows Bridge out of play. So
Yeah.
what happens is it reverts to a max scenario. We meet quarterly. So we're on the same page here. So, yeah.
So we're gonna keep trying with that.
Yeah.
Make sure that we can, but
It's amazing
One
what
of
we
the-
learned.
it was one of my first months here when Kelly gave the training to all staff in early 2016 of emergency management. And I felt that it was so helpful to be able to see as even city staff where you fit in and to have that that knowledge, and so we look forward to being able to provide that. But I am interested in a full drill, including you guys as well, so.
That training that we did then was in lieu of Cascadia Rising. We started down the road of participating in that regionally, and they took us out to play, and we were like, that does us no good, so that we just, some internal training.
Even this presentation, makes me feel more comfortable
It was a goal.
that somebody's looking at it.
Yeah.
I would really stress the satellite phone issue
Yeah.
too.
I wrote an
Even
exclamation
a couple
mark
of
next to
them,
it.
Yeah.
because the self-service will be down.
They're
Having
not.
been through the San Francisco earthquake. Yeah, it does not stay up.
I don't have the same connections that Kelly has, so if you have additional connections at the state for training, maybe we can.
Well, for ICS
You
training,
just let me,
we did
yeah,
this training.
you're good.
We're good.
Okay, we're with it.
Well, thank you so much. This is very informational and, looking forward to more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. We have 30 minutes. And so again, I'm gonna have Carl give his presentation. And if you could write questions down, that would be great. If at all possible, hold them to the end of Carl, at least his PowerPoint, so that we can get through all the slides. And then we'll answer questions.
Yeah, my PowerPoint should be fairly quick, so we can get into the discussion.
All right,
Right, where we want to go anyway. Thank you, Mayor.
you're welcome.
Good afternoon, council. We're here to talk about,
Oh, I didn't even introduce it. I'm sorry.
We're not asking any questions until you're done.
Our community development director, Carl. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, council.
I told you,
Good
I
afternoon.
don't know my name today. Sorry.
So we are here to talk about, this is our first short-term rental program update. And so and you all had a chance to see the PowerPoint. I'm gonna run through that PowerPoint. And what I've attempted to do here is just to give sort of an overview of the program itself, and then talk about some of the statistics that we've got so far. So as you're all aware, ordinance 1507 authorized the short-term rental program. It was adopted at your meeting February 27th and became effective March 8th. And then, of course, you're all aware of the things that it did, the ordinance itself. Notably allowing one short-term rental permit per owner operator, established the performance standards for the program and established a permitting process. So our program, hopefully this is gonna work for me, is made up of these items: application checklist, good neighbor policy, the short-term rental client assistance memo, and then of course we have information by way of our short-term rental program website that we're maintaining. And then we've gotten under contract with Granicus, and I can touch on that a little bit more in a minute, but just wanted to briefly show you all the that's not good. I'm gonna have to do it this way. Whoops. Bear with me. Share, have to unshare and go through each.
Oh, you may.
Yeah.
Can you do?
And if you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I looked at it.
Okay, great.
And they're in the
Sorry.
packet for the public to view as well.
Uh,
Yes, in the council packet.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have a complete packet here with me, so just making sure.
Yeah.
Them, they're on the web.
The PowerPoint is, and all those links are live. so.
Perfect, great.
Okay, sorry about that, council, apologize. I can get it next time. So that's our short-term rental program. So far, Gig Harbor, our short-term rentals at a glance. We've had 17 complete applications since it was authorized since the ordinance went into effect on March 8th. We've issued 7 permits, actually 8 as of today now. We have two applicants from outside of the city, but inside of the Gig Harbor zip code. So they have a Gig Harbor address technically, but they're not inside the actual city limits. And we actually have two applicants from outside of the state. I was mistaken on that. One from California, and we have one from Alaska. And the reason that I missed it was because the way the applications are coming in, we're oftentimes getting an owner, which is typically an LLC, is what we've been seeing. And then we have the actual applicant, which is the owner or a member of that LLC, as best that we can tell. And so in this case, the one from Alaska, the actual owner, the LLC, has a home address in Alaska, but the applicant actually provided us with the Gig Harbor address, the same address as the short-term rental, which is what most of them are showing us. Five of those applications are new short-term rental operations, and when I say new, I mean, we had, from our survey that we had provided council last year, I think we had about 25 short-term rentals that we surveyed throughout the city that we could find just kind of going through Airbnb and VRBO and then sort of identifying those addresses through Google Street View, essentially. So just kind of a very rudimentary survey that we tried to conduct. So of those 25, all of the 17 that have come in, minus 5, so 12 of the 17 that have come in are on that list and 5 aren't. That's what I was trying to convey there. We received 4 comments during the notice of application period. So every application is a type 2 permit. We send out a notice of application to all property owners within 300 feet of that location. And we get comments back. We received 4 comments. All of the comments were against short-term rentals. 3 of them were less substantive, more of a, I don't really want them in my neighborhood, feel like they're degrading the neighborhood feel and character, and some concerns about potential safety because of other people coming into their neighborhoods who they don't know. And one comment was substantive in the sense that where the applicant wanted to utilize parking, they noted that they had parking on a private street. It was actually an easement. That easement provided access to 3 other lots. And so those folks wrote in as they should and said that they can't be parking on our street for this thing. So we wrote a condition into the approval so that they had to utilize the 2 spots that they have in their driveway for the short-term rental. Otherwise, if they are parking in that private easement, it becomes a civil matter between those property owners. And the comment that had come in said that the owners of that home had already been parking boats and other things. It's been kind of an ongoing problem in the neighborhood. So, and also if it did become an issue as far as getting access for fire or safety or anything like that, and that was brought to our attention, we would certainly look into it. But we handled it through a condition, so it was responded to. We've had 3 complaints filed, all phone calls. All of the complaints were relative to a short-term rental operating in a neighborhood, and maybe that they didn't have any permits. They were assuming that they didn't have permits. 2 of those we looked into, and there was no wasn't substantiated. They were just a regular house, maybe a rental, and 1 was substantiated. We contacted that homeowner, property owner. They came in with their permit application. It's in process right now. So short-term rental locations, Finholm and Millville, and I will pull up this map, so I'll stop sharing and pull up the map in just a moment. But Millville and Finholm, as we would have expected, receiving have the majority of them, right? And these numbers also include lodging level 1s, which were approved by a CUP previously, and we have 5 of those. So these are the short-term rental locations that are just within Finholm and Millville. So obviously it's not the full number that we have within the city. Let me just stop sharing and then pull up that map here. Okay, here we go, great. Okay, so here's our map of, where these are located. This is obviously the Millville neighborhood. The blue parcels are those that, are short-term rentals. The red parcels are those that are, lodging level ones. And then the green is, one where we have a, business license in, but we don't necessarily have an application in for that property yet, but we know that they are wanting to operate a short-term rental, so they've been contacted at this point. So I'll scroll down to this next area, which is our Finholm area. And so you can see we've got a couple that are sort of up here and outside, of the, technically the Finholm area, so they didn't get captured in those numbers that I provided. But you can see we've got quite a few concentrated in that neighborhood as well. And you can see there's a couple down here as well. There's a CUP here, a lodging level one that's in an apartment. And then we have a couple others that are outside, so these are down towards the south, down towards the Deep Road area, three down there as well. And then I'm gonna switch right over to, so I have to do a stop share and come back to everything again here. I just wanted to bring up, so this is a map of the view basin. So the blue shading is our height restriction area for the city. And the yellow underlying that is the historic district. And so I wanted to show that all of the short-term rentals that we have in the city so far are all within the view basin. They're all within the height restriction
What's in
area.
the green?
Sorry.
The green on the shore?
Well, I think that's the yellow, the blue.
Oh, this here,
Yeah.
the yellow, that's the historic district. That's our historic district. So the historic district is all fully encompassed within the height restriction area. So so most of them are gonna be within our Millville area, the Finholm area up here, but even those that are just outside of those areas are still within the height restriction area. The three that were down south, they're all within the height restriction area as well, which makes sense, right? I think that seems logical.
And so part of the reason that Carl has pulled this information is there were some concerns through the public process of certain neighborhoods or streets being inundated with these, and so wanted to provide this information for the geography purposes. So you can kind of see where they're located and the concentration of them.
Just
Mayor, it
one-
may be beneficial for you to mention to the public that we don't take public comments at a work session. I believe there's a hand up.
Oh, yeah, I'm not able to see hands,
Okay.
but, yes. Those watching online, thank you very much for joining us. We don't take public comment at study sessions, but, please feel free to email, mayor and council at city or at gigharborwa.gov. If you have comments, or any of the individual council members email, and we can answer your questions. I think also
I'm
Carl
also there.
DeSimis, is available as well, and we can provide your email maybe at the end for people to send comments and questions.
And for council to be able to see who's watching, we can't see the list that we normally
Maybe,
see.
yeah.
Thank you.
You attend meetings.
Yeah. So just a couple more. Oh,
Over
sorry.
to attendees, yeah, yeah.
Yep, we're on attendees now.
Yeah, right. Oh, sorry. Yes.
And just a couple more slides here. So, the reason I showed one of the other reasons I showed the height restriction area and the historic district is to show where, how many dwelling units we have in this area. So total, approximately 1,400 dwelling units within that height restriction area. And 250 approximately within the historic district. Of course, those are encapsulated into the height restriction area, and that was why I wanted to show you that map. So about 1,400 dwelling units. We have 17 short-term rental applications, a few issued, 5 lodging level 1 short-term rentals. So that's basically the percentage out of the 1,400.
Yeah.
Um, all the short-term rentals pending applications are located within in the height restriction area. And 11 of those are located outside of the historic district, so. Half there. That's it, so we can jump into discussion now, which I know you guys want to get there. I'm sorry, that's painful.
District includes Goodhome.
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Councilmember Lakey?
yeah, thank you. Thank you for including the numbers. That's really helpful, just looking at like percentage wise. So just to clarify, within the historic district, there's approximately 250 dwelling units. There's 6 currently in that.
Yeah, 6 of the short-term rental applications that we have, and then with it. And I guess it depends on how we want to characterize the lodging level ones. I mean, they're technically not a short-term rental, so. I've included them because they're operating as a short-term rental, but and the majority of those are also in the historic district.
Okay, and if we wanted to, let's say, in the future, depending on, you know, what we're monitoring, let's say we want to limit, there's seen some places do 5 to 10% or something like that, then we can use these kind of base numbers, like 5% would be 12 or 13.
Yeah, and we maybe want to get a little more concrete numbers on the.
Sure.
On the number of dwelling units in those areas, if that's the direction we want to go. I mean, these are estimates that that we took from GIS. So Mike Simmons did a survey, and he basically did a roof survey, right? So, and painstaking for him, but I really appreciate him doing the work. And so he was looking at structures, and then he was determining whether or not there were single family, multifamily, or, you know, duplexes, and then he sort of broke it out from there. So I really appreciate him helping me out with that. And, but we would certainly want to drill down a little bit further if we are wanting to have that discussion.
Thank you.
Councilmember?
Thank you. There's some really good information on this. Can we put some of this information on our website?
We absolutely can, absolutely, yeah, and I think it would be a really good idea that we do.
Because those, I'm trying to think which one of you cover SDRs at a glance. I think that would be really good to have on our website, and
Okay,
I would really like to see on our opening page is to have a link there for short terminals, because it's not easy to find that page.
I agree with you, Councilman. I know it is difficult to find some of these things on the website. It's something that we've been talking about in the department. And actually in citywide, we recognize that our, and Josh Stecker has been talking about that too, that we need an overhaul of the website. It's been a few years. It needs to be modernized and brought up to speed. And Civic Plus does have a new module. They release new modules every few years, and we're due for that update. It's just a matter of coordinating with them, as I understand it.
That'd be great. I think it's more, the more information we can put out there and have it easy is the more transparent it is.
Absolutely agree.
So thank you.
Especially as the topic is hot, right? So as we know that a lot of people are interested, we're looking to do that.
Believe me, we are having internal discussions about the website, so changes are coming, we just don't know when. Councilmember Henderson.
Carl, again, good presentation. So of all these newer permittees that came in, how many houses that we lost as far as being flipped from a lot? Do we know that?
We don't really know that. That's tough. That's a tough one. And I think one of the, and by the way, I wanted to thank council for sending me your thoughts. It was very helpful to help me focus this presentation and understand what you wanted. Hopefully I hit the mark on that. That was a question that was asked, and it's a difficult one for us to get to. And I'm hoping that maybe when we start to get some data from Granicus, that we may be able to drill down on that a little bit.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm also very interested in. What I can say is that we know what we know, or what we think we know, is that we've had about 25 of these that we surveyed. You know, that we could say concretely, there are definitely 25. There might be more, but we know there's 25. And before, right? We have 5 new that weren't included in that list of 25. So we could surmise maybe that there are 5 that were conversions at this point, at least.
But some of those were just switching to a room being rented. They weren't, I mean, unless all 5 noted that they're complete houses for rent. We don't.
Yeah, from what I understand, and this is from what my staff has told me, what we've received so far on these short-term rentals are whole house rentals.
Okay,
Not,
What we're looking at. for the most
not
part.
all of them.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, no, they're not. Paul Patsix is a,
Well, that's an
for
ADU.
sure. And I know there's another one that isn't, a couple that are not full.
Okay, so I will retract that. There are
Sorry.
some that might be
To
ADUs,
narrow.
but they're not, I don't know that we have any where they're saying, we're going to live there and I'm gonna rent out. just
Yeah, there are a
in
couple.
my house.
There are some.
Okay,
Yeah.
There are some.
okay, all right.
I think suffice to say, it's a pretty hot topic just in and of itself, is how much housing stock is or is not being lost. And I think soon as we can get that data, that'll
Yeah.
also help.
Absolutely.
Carl, I don't know if it's possible for the, for Granicus to look, I know if you go on the Pierce County Assessor Treasurer Office and you, or website, you look up a parcel number, it gives a history of that property, whether it was started as an investment or started as a, you know, owner occupied. It may be on there.
Mhm.
I don't know. It used to be. I don't know if it's still available on that website, but
It probably is.
it might be there.
Yeah.
Councilmember Martin, I have you next.
So how long will we give individuals that we think we know have STRs to come into compliance? Are we waiting for Granicus?
Great question, Councilman. Yeah, we are. We've talked about that internally, been talking about that with, the city clerk's office, and Tiffany and Josh. And we want, we don't want to surmise. We could say, yeah, we think, we know that there's a couple of business licenses out there. Or people have come in for a business license and they haven't followed up with a permit. So we do have at least two, I believe, that we could start code compliance action on at this point, because we know for a fact. Of course, if we get complaints from citizens and we go and look into that and find that's another way that we could start, getting into compliance, which we've already done a couple of times, or, yeah, a couple of times. And then, of course, when we get the Granicus data, we'll know for sure. And so that is kind of what we're waiting on. Is once we have that Granicus data, then we will have a concrete list of those who are operating outside of the ordinance, and then we can start in on those as well. And what that policy will look like as far as time, I think we'll have to have a discussion about internally what our level of flexibility is.
An important consideration right now is Adam has been in the property and everyone's been
Yeah.
transitioning over, and so depending on the amount of STRs that we have, it will need to come up with a program of how we're going to accomplish that, but it is important for us to remember that we have our code enforcement program set out in code, and it's important for us to have an unbiased and treat everyone the same way, so Carl has been talking.
And I would just like to follow up with Granicus. I'm waiting on sort of a first update from them. I reached out to them to find out from what I understand, when we first signed the contract, we'd be looking at getting initial report from them or in early to mid-May. So coming soon.
And then
So
you and I chatted by email briefly, just Leavenworth's looking at their short-term rentals and whether or not
Yeah.
they're going to limit the amount of short-term rentals by street. Like we said, where's the magic number?
yeah, that's
So
always.
it'll be interesting to follow that as we.
It will be, and they were looking, and I looked into that after you sent that to me, and they're talking, what they were talking about in that article, or what I was reading was bed and breakfast, and so I don't know, what I don't understand is if they're using that interchangeably with short-term
I
rentals,
saw
or
them
if
use
they're
a couple,
just
yeah.
focused on bed and breakfast. And there is a lot of gray area in that, I mean, bed and breakfasts are, they're very, very,
Yeah.
but they are different by definition, so. So it will be interesting. I am interested to see what Leavenworth comes up with.
And I'm not saying that's what we would do, it's just
Yeah.
interesting to see another jurisdiction.
We don't have a lot of examples of limiting by percentage, so that would be good to see something. Chelan.
Councilmember Weber?
Yeah, Carl, I have a quick question. Could you remind me again how you define the new STR operations, the 5 new applicants?
Those were 5 that were not included in our list of 25 when we did our survey. I think it was late in the fall last year, maybe winter last year. And Jeremy Hammer did sort of an online survey, again, rudimentary, but the best that we could do just to kind of get a sense of what we think we can maybe establish a baseline of some kind.
So
So
it
those-
could be people who weren't in operation at the time,
Could
but
be,
So they're seasonal or something like
It's
that too.
possible, yeah, it's
Okay.
possible that they just didn't show up at that time in our survey, because again, that was just kind of a point in time.
Okay.
count.
But you also reviewed the business list. So these would be 5 that did not previously have a business license.
That's also true, yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, Katrina,
that's good to
true,
know.
Councilmember.
Yeah, since you said that one of the complaints was on a house that was not a short-term rental. And so two of the complaints were on houses that were not short-term rentals. So as we put something on the website, will we have a listing of the addresses of short-term rentals so that that complaint doesn't happen again, so that?
Well, all of the short-term rental applications are posted on the website, and you can get to the physical address by clicking and going to
The permit
link to
portal,
the
that's
permit
right,
portal.
but that's not an easy thing. If we're gonna have a website dedicated to short-term rentals, why wouldn't you wanna have the addresses on there?
Well, I think the reason for that is because that information that's in the permit portal is relative directly to their application. So that's information that's entered into our application system, and I think that's what we should rely upon, and therefore, and then we don't end up with any mistakes. in
Oh, right,
translating that information onto the website. So we have, I mean, in my opinion, they can get, someone can get to the address with one click from the website, as long as, and I take your point is well taken, that getting to the short-term rental website is a little bit wonky at the moment. We need to fix that, but I think getting from the website to the portal is pretty easy, one click.
So maybe then we could have the portal part, well, not the portal part, but with all the application numbers.
Yeah.
Could we have the application numbers on that website then?
They are.
And so then, well, they are now, but we're gonna do a new website is what I understand, or webpage.
Well, we're not going
It'll make
to,
it easier to find and revamp.
yeah, it'll be this, all the information on the current website will remain, it'll be the same. We just need to, the whole website needs a makeover. It needs to be brought up to current times. Simply.
I mean, all you have to do is click there, but somehow it
Yeah.
needs to be available for the folks to know they can click there.
Yeah, okay, and maybe that's just, maybe we need a little bit of an explanatory,
Right,
Verbiage
and how to get to
above
that
the
page
table.
now, because you have to search for it. It's not an easy page to find.
getting to the page, and I completely agree with you, Councilman. We need to find a way to link from the main page to that short-term rental page.
Right.
We will have it up on the front page.
Okay, and it's pretty like this.
So it will, so that when you're on the front page, you'll be able to see kind of like a hot link thing.
Great.
Because we're getting a lot of questions about this and it doesn't do us or the residents any good to not have this available. So
Great, great.
Councilmember Reddick.
Yeah. Not that Councilmember Martin advocated us looking at Cheyenne or Leavenworth, but even if they pass that limitation of so many on one street, we should wait a while before we even look at it, give it any credence, because that will absolutely be challenged. That's
Oh, yeah.
unconstitutional. You can't treat a guy next door differently than the guy next door.
Oh, I'm not.
So
suggesting
I know
we
you-
go with it.
I know
Yeah,
you-
I agree
I'm
with
just
what you're
saying that-
saying, yeah.
We say they pass an ordinance tomorrow. We shouldn't pay attention to it till we find out it hasn't been challenged, as it will. Or should be.
as an asterisk to that, there could be a potential, I haven't read the case, but in Washington state under zoning laws, there are things that we can do that other states cannot under the planning and enactment law in our state. But it can't be, it can't be. It just left me, well, it's just gone. Essentially, it would have to be zone by zone or some specific district, right? You couldn't say this property, this, that property, that.
And that's what Cheyenne has done, is they've taken areas and said within this, almost like sub-area planning in some ways.
There would have to be a purpose for it, right?
Has to be a
There's
purpose.
a reason, there's a reason.
Just a few minutes left. Councilmember Lincoln.
Yeah, this is just a really quick question. Of the 4 comments that were received, was that from 4 unique people?
Yes,
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
and the one that was relative to the private road was signed by all of the property owners on that road, so I think there's 4 property owners on the road, and they all signed that.
Yeah.
Signed on
sounds
to that,
like
saying
hopefully-
we disagree with the proposal here, and we respond.
But they still got the permit because they had 2.
Correct.
Okay,
I don't know if that permit's been issued yet, but yes, it was issued, actually.
That would
It was issued,
prevent them
yeah,
from
because we
The permit.
put the condition on it. Sorry, it's been a little fast and furious with the short-term rental.
No,
We had
you
trying
don't
to
have
get
a
them
lot
out.
of.
Thank you very much for this.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is really, really good. I noticed that the permits have all been issued with conditions or
Yeah,
they all
I
seem
saw
to
that.
be issued with conditions and
Mhm.
under an appeal time period, which makes sense, but do they all have different conditions that they were approved under, or what does that mean on their approval?
Most, if not all of them are gonna have the same conditions we're using, because there just isn't anything special about them.
Yeah.
And we usually, when we issue a land use permit, there are typically conditions that we apply to them, and oftentimes they're generic, in the sense that must comply with all of the regulations. Give you authorization to do this thing, you're going to need more permitting, you might need a building permit, engineering permit. Maybe there was something that came out of SEPA for in other cases, not in these cases. But for these permits, yeah, we've got fairly standard language that we're using for all of them, except, like I said, for the one case where we need to talk about the parking and ensure that they're utilizing just those 2 spaces.
And in regard to that parking, I just wanted to provide clarification, and you indicated that would be a civil matter. Which it definitely could be, but also when we're issuing a condition on a land use permit, if they're not following that, then that would be something that's in violation with approval. And then the city could take action on that code enforcement wise, so.
That's a great point, Katrina, and I should say that when I said that, if they were parking their personal vehicles over in that alleyway or that private access easement, so we would have to discern a difference between if it were their personal vehicles, the property owners, or whether it was actually related to the short-term rental business. So of course, that would be a tough investigation, but we would look into it and do the best we can.
Councilor Henderson?
What's your time frame for turning these around? Looks like it's been pretty quick.
There's not, I mean, there isn't a lot
Yeah.
to review on these. It's not
Okay.
like a typical land use permit. So I mean, we've issued, what did I shoot over my numbers again? We've issued 7, 8 as of today, and we've been getting these in since, as of March 8th, I think we were receiving applications. So yeah, we're turning these around in just a few weeks.
Yeah, it's just a quick wrap-up question. How often or how are we gonna communicate this going forward? Like, is it gonna be in the Friday updates or how you wanna do that? And what would be really helpful is if you all share from a staff perspective, what's working well, what's not working, and what concerns you have. I would love to hear that.
I appreciate that, and we've been working with, well, Carl and Jeremy. Jeremy's not able to be here because his wife had her second child.
Little Henry Hammer.
Little Henry. Oh my God.
Your name is John, Henry.
His name is my name too.
But we'll be looking into how we're communicating this, and I think staff does have some, now that they've gone through the process, and in addition with the data from Granicus, be able to provide some professional recommendations for consideration.
Yeah.
On this, so, but our main focus is to get this on the webpage so that it's viewable. We'll also be working on a communication out to the residents, all residents, about kind of what short-term rentals are, what action was taken, what it's doing, and then where to find the accurate information so that everyone can be on the same page.
So I imagine the staff time will, once you get a list initial bunch of people that are gonna try and get permits going forward, staff time would be much.
We're anticipating that the big one has come from Martin, talked about if there truly were 68 or I think our estimate was 40 to 65 short-term rentals in operation. The code enforcement component is what we don't know at this point and what that's going to look like. And that does take quite a lot of staff time. So I think it would transition from planning to admin.
Yeah.
Could we adjust the fees to compensate if there is an increased cost so that they cover?
And we heard that from council in the discussion on this, and that's something
Okay.
that again is in the back of staff's mind as they're going through this and processing it as the, you know, as we go
Yeah.
forward.
I suggested that, and I think Daniel said, that would be punitive. Why we couldn't do
Cost recovery, I think, or something like that. Yeah, you did.
There's definitely legal items for us to consider in terms of that, but we can have code enforcement fees or other fees that allow us to do some cost recovery as long as, and there's a legal term for it, but it can't be, you know, $10 or $1 million for.
Right.
Yeah. Has to be a reasonable fee, and we have to be able to show that it's for the purposes of that
Yeah.
permit.
This is very helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Something I wanted to throw out to council, not looking for an answer right now, but it feels that our study sessions are a bit rushed these days and we have a lot to talk about. So if you all could let Katrina or I, maybe CCS both know if you would be okay with going back to 2 to 5 for study sessions. And then if we wrap up early, great, but at least then we've got enough time.
Yeah.
So I thank Katrina for bringing that to my attention because I've been thinking it for a couple months.
Well, there's a
I'm
number of
seeing
things
thumbs
that
up,
staff
but-
are wanting to bring forward, and
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out how to bring all of this forward, and
Yeah.
it's just.
And so like we're adding a third study
I'd
session
rather
this
have the
month
2 to
because-
5 than add the third
Yes.
I
session.
could just miss the first hour.
It's probably a good idea
That's
to bring it up to
that's
the
okay.
salary commission.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Yeah,
that too.
there's that too. But if that's okay with you, I think it would help
Yeah.
staff and us to not feel so rushed.
Right.
And you all wouldn't feel like, I wouldn't have to ask you, like, hold all your questions, and, you know, and be so, you know, like that, so.
In most cases, except for Councilman Hopkins, the whole afternoon is dedicated to this anyways.
Yeah, and if people have to come be on their phone for part of it, or virtual for part of it, or miss the
I
first
would
half,
have to miss the first.
that's okay. Because as long as we have a quorum here at the start of the meeting,
Likely, yeah, I have a regular meeting, used to be 1 to 2, and that one 2 to 3, so literally I log on from. To it. And it's morbidity mortality.
Okay,
so
let's
we
coordinate.
can talk, we can
Yeah.
coordinate, but I just wanted to throw that out there, just think about it, and then we'll get back with you probably in an email or something, just to see what we can do.
Anything we can make it easier for staff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Appreciate
and
that
I'm
very
happy to
much.
go back and watch that first hour.
Yeah, sure.
Let's talk about it.
Well, You and I can
That's
talk about
fine.
that, and we can also consider that, when we're setting the agenda of what goes
Mhm.
first.
Yeah,
Well,
because we're not
We also have to.
voting officially in study sessions,
Yeah.
everything will still come back, you know,
Yeah,
come to it. at
we
a
also have to
meeting.
remember set schedule.
Well,
in
yes,
this
and
also.
that's why I know it
Yeah.
won't work for everyone, but if it
Yeah.
works for the majority, I think it would be beneficial to go back to the 2 to 5. So we'll talk it out but send us your feedback. Email would be great if you just want to email us what you think. Yes, no, maybe, then we can just get the conversation started. Maybe. Well, okay, if there is nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Okay,
I second that.
meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
The computer guy is up there because now I walked out of my